Hi, this is Dr. Charlton again. I wanted to go through a few things and kind of cover early on some trouble spots I often see on student projects. One of the things I see commonly is students failing to make a strong case for why they think something should be the way it is, failing to present evidence, failing to provide a logical argument as to why. This current presentation assumes that there could be some problem earlier in like thinking processes that students are going through. So I want to go through some reasoning kind of exercises and explain some processes to you that can hopefully help you as you go forward. They can help you come up with a better idea, a better argument, both for the class and afterwards when you get a job. So these are some things that we keep trying to touch on in marketing classes, but I'm going to go into them in depth because I want to make sure that you have good, strong skills in this area. It's going to help you when you do interviews. It'll help you when you're on the job and trying to persuade someone more senior to carry forward your idea. So it can only benefit you. So first of all, we had a couple of articles, and I pulled the thoughts out of the articles. One was an HBR about how to think critically, and the other article was a sort of a summary of Adam Grant's originals book, where he studies the science of how to think more creatively. So we're thinking critically, we're thinking creatively. So let's talk about how to do that. So first of all, I like stories. I think stories are a really good way, and more real world type stuff, I think is a good way to understand some, different processes. And so we're going to use the example of customer service ratings. So we work at a company, hypothetically, let's say we work at a company that is provides some kind of local service. Maybe it's a plumbing company, maybe it's carpentry, any kind of local service, and we see that customer ratings are very low. So we're getting a lot of negative feedback from customers, a lot of poor reviews on the internet, on Yelp, on Google Maps. We're getting these a lot of mediocre reviews, really, but we'd love to have stellar reviews. So it's kind of an investigative process to try to figure out A, what's wrong, and then B, how to fix it. It's a big problem, right? And so one of the mistakes people make is they go to the client with just a problem, or they go to their boss with just a problem, and problems without solutions are not really helpful. So what you want to do is come with an answer, like this is what we need to do. We should do this, and this is why. And so how do we get to that? So let's talk about that. So first of all, thinking critically. Number one, we question assumptions. What do you assume about the customer feedback? Do you assume that you're getting worse feedback than other similar competitors in your industry? Maybe everybody gets the same feedback in this industry. There's something about this industry, the way it does things, that people don't like. For example, say you work in property management. People don't like it when you enforce a lot of rules. I mean, property management is notoriously, it's like being a debt collector. I mean, people are going to be unhappy because you're enforcing rules and policies on them. You're evicting them, whatever. You're not taking care of the scorpion problem. So people are going to be really unhappy with your whole entire industry. So do you assume that? So it could be a mistake to assume it's not the whole industry. It could be a mistake to assume that it is the whole industry. So you want to look into that. How much of it is just because it's just structural because of the industry you're in. People are going to have take this kind of issue with it. So you want to look into that. So we'll look into that with the customer reviews and see if other businesses have this same problem. Next step is, well, I mean, there could be a lot more assumptions. Let's stick with this step. What other assumptions could there be? We assume that um, nothing can be done to improve our customer reviews. We assume that customer reviews are made by actual customers who did business with us and not by competitors and not by people who never even engaged our services but were unhappy with the original estimate, etc. We assume that I mean, we could assume a lot of things. And so we question all those assumptions, and then we can start to get at the root of the problem because we want to know why, why. Everything is why, right? Why do we get all these bad reviews? We're not going to be able to solve it and figure out what to do about it until we've diagnosed the problem. That's about questioning assumptions. So, so you want to methodically go through, question all these assumptions, rule things out until you arrive at the reason for the bad reviews. So let's say in our case, it's multiple causality. We decide, we determined that there's a couple things going on. One, our industry gets hit a lot. For example, I've worked in medical fields where all the patients are, well, there's a lot of different problems, right? There's drug seeking patients. You don't give me the drugs I want, I'm mad. Disability, like people want to go on disability. They think they're qualified for disability. If you say no, they're mad. And so you're just doing your job, but you've made the customer unhappy. And so in doing it, doing a diligent effort. And so there could be, let's say there's things about our industry that just makes it hard to get good positive reviews and makes it likely you're going to get a lot of negative reviews. For example, a towing company. I mean, people are going to be unhappy when they get towed, right? You're going to get some negative feedback. So that's just part of the deal. So we've identified part of the problem, which is our industry. Is there anything that we can do, though, to improve customer satisfaction? I mean, why don't we look at our company internally, look at these reviews, see if there are any recurring patterns? Maybe people hate the wait times, but let's look and compare that to other competitors, who are kind of in the same boat. Do people complain about their wait times just as much? If we called down there and tried to get on the schedule with the competitor, and went down there and checked out their waiting room, I mean, would they have a huge queue of people just sitting around waiting, unhappy? Or is that us? Are we especially bad in that area? So let's just keep questioning and digging and investigating until we can figure out what's wrong. And then, both externally, like industry problems. So people hate our industry, it makes them unhappy having to deal with us. That's one issue. The other issue is what can we do better? And let's dig through all that. Um, okay, so reasoning through logic. I feel like this is a little bit ironically circular because you think critically by reasoning through logic. I mean, obviously you want to use logic. So I think so. If I'm going to use the customer service example for this, um, so you want to reason through this whole process, right? So so our reviews are bad because um, we are in an industry that's prone to very bad reviews. Our competitors have bad reviews, and B, our customer service could be improved. But the question is whether it really could be improved enough to improve your review profile, because your goal is positive reviews, right? And so you always want to improve customer service, but you don't know if that will really move the needle in this area. So you want to reason through all of that, rather than just throwing tons of money and effort behind a solution that may not solve your problem. In this HBR reading, they gave an example of a fallacy of logical thinking. Uh, an area where people don't think logically, and it becomes a hindrance. And that's the post hoc thinking. So you see that event Y follows event X. So then you assume that event Y is caused by X. So this is the whole problem of people thinking correlation is causation, right? So let's see. So examples of correlation not being causation. So things that are related, but not caused by each other. All right. Um, so so an example of things being related, but one of them not being causal is So an example of correlation probably not being causation comes up a lot in politics. People observe a negative character trait in a politician that was elected, and then they assume that people elected them because of that negative trait. It could have been in spite of that trait. And so then you have this post hoc thinking where it's like, well, this person is really rude, or or funny, or whatever it is. It's usually a negative trait that people zero in on, and then they say, well, that's why they voted for him, because of that negative trait. And usually, you're going to get elected despite a negative trait. That's usually the way it works, not always, but to assume that that negative trait is what made people want to vote for the person is possibly a post hoc thinking error. It could be correct in some cases. It's hard for me to say. I'd have to see the situation and just give my opinion. But it is an example of post hoc thinking that could go wrong. Number 3, you want to diversify thought. So you want to get ideas from a lot of different fields and people. So if you're you're a marketing person, talk to the salespeople, see what they think. Do they have some insight into this? Just get some feedback. Also, like diversity of, gender, maybe different people that could look at it from an outsider perspective as like a potential customer, and like, hey, what could we do different? Even talk to the customers. Like, what is it that we're failing at that we could improve that would make you? And so you're just collecting all this feedback. And interestingly, this is number 3 for thinking critically. It's also related to number 3 for thinking creatively. So number 3 for both critical thinking and creative thinking are related to feedback. So you want to get feedback, and on your ideas. And with the customer service thing, I think, for example, that if we were to provide better training to the front desk person, that customer satisfaction would improve. So how do we test that? Can we go observe the front desk person? Can we talk to people? Can we talk to them and see where they're at with things? Can we talk to the customers and see if they would be happy if the front desk person were nicer? Just to get an idea and you want to collect ideas from a lot of different kinds of people. The operations people have a lot, they're the ones doing the job, so they know kind of like how the interactions with the customers really go. So talk to them, observe them, and you're going to diversify thought that way. The only way that diversity of thought is not an advantage is when, well, the main way I should say is efficiency. It's often more efficient just to do things yourself without asking or talking to anybody. But in the long run, that's going to come back to bite you. You want to get feedback. You want to get a lot of different ideas, and diversify thought. And when I say diversify thought, I'm not just talking about gender or ethnic diversity, although those things help lead to diversified thoughts, generally speaking. But I'm talking about like differences of idea, approach, viewpoints, and you want to get all that feedback. So next, now that we're thinking critically and we're solving problems, so again, getting at the why, we're explaining to the client in our case why it's important for them to do this thing that we think they should do, why we think this will solve their marketing problem. So we go through all this whole reasoning process to develop our logic of why. Next, we looking at thinking creatively. So the first thing is question defaults. This is very similar to questioning assumptions. So I want you to just see this pattern of thinking critically and thinking creatively being very related, okay? So a default, what is the default? So for example, with the customer service situation, we have this default process of dealing with the customers. For example, we have to charge late fees. We have to, but do you have to? Do you need that? Blockbuster was put out of business Blockbuster Video was partly put out of business because they did charge late fees and Netflix did not. Eventually, they killed the late fees right before they went out of business. So you want to question that. Like, do you have to charge late fees? Would customer satisfaction be much higher if you did not? So you're going to question all these defaults. It's just like questioning the assumptions. So an assumption is something that you think is true, but you haven't really tested it, so you don't know for sure. A default is, this is the way we're doing it. So you question assumptions and defaults in order to really improve your thinking on the project. Number two, generate a lot of ideas. So the more ideas you have, the more things you can roll out and test and eliminate and scale back. This is a big aspect of thinking creatively. Most ideas should die, right? I mean, it's just the good ideas that you want to survive. But if you only have a few ideas, then it has to be one of those ideas that survives. So it's an issue of just like quantity. If you can generate a lot of cool, good ideas, then you can really select the best one. You go use your team as a team, go through and cherry pick the ones that are most likely for success. Number three, again, getting peer feedback. So when you talk to peer, so a peer is somebody who's at an equal level to you. Okay. So when you talk to a peer, here's the thing, like, hopefully they'll be honest with you. They don't owe you anything. They don't have to like your idea. So hopefully they can give you candid feedback. That's the idea. That's why you want to talk to peers. So you come with your creative idea, like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is why. What do you think? And just get feedback from them. So in our case, because we're dealing with marketing and customers, we want to get lots of feedback from the actual customers, right, as well. So and so we talk about also diversifying, like a broad spectrum of customers. So again, like, just to kind of summarize this whole thing, you need to do some investigative work to diagnose the marketing problem. Don't just, if somebody comes to you and says, we need more customers, don't just assume that you can run more ads and get the customers. It's possible there's something wrong with their product. People don't want the product. People don't need the product. There's no market for the product. There's a competitive product that's better. I mean, there could be so many product issues. There could be pricing issues. The price, people don't want to pay that price. So then you're going to dump all this money into advertising. It could turn out to be a tragic error. Okay, so if you go through this whole process of thinking through things, and the next stage, of course, is testing things. But if you go through and think through all these things logically and see where your assumptions are that need to be tested, where the defaults are that maybe you can question, and then you can really diagnose your problem and have a reason why you think this is the underlying cause. Okay, I mean, it's just like when you go to the doctor and you already know you're sneezing and you have a runny nose. And so if the doctor says you're sneezing and have a runny nose, that doesn't help, right? What you want them to do is tell you if you have a flu, if you have, virus, bacterial kind of infection, what is going on with you. And then they're going to have to diagnose the problem before they can give you a remedy. You don't want them to give you antibiotics and you don't even have any kind of bacterial problem going on, because that could cause other problems, right? So it's the same way with our work. We want to thoroughly diagnose the problem, thoroughly understand the problem. And then once we understand the problem, then we can come up with a reasonable solution. So this all has to do with thinking skills. And, really, I feel like we all do a decent job of going through this kind of thinking, but what we need to do is a better job of communicating it. So that will be in my next video, where I'll talk about making a persuasive argument. But hopefully this will get us started in that direction. And that's all I've got.